This story is titled, Caught My Wife Affair with My Brother and She's Pregnant. My epic revenge left everyone speechless. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, please like this video and subscribe. Positive Voices. Let's begin. Evening, babe. I'm home. Nathan's voice carried through the quiet house. His tone tinged with the exhaustion of a long day. He set down his leather briefcase near the door, loosening his tie. The house seemed unusually still, save for the faint clinking of glass from the kitchen. Nathan followed the sound and found Claire by the kitchen island, swirling a glass of red wine. She wore a silk blouse that shimmered under the pendant lights. Her posture elegant, yet slightly stiff. Busy day, she asked, her lips curving into a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Exhausting, Nathan replied, leaning in to kiss her cheek, but it paid off. Closed the Novak deal today. Biggest one of the quarter. That's fantastic. Claire said, her voice light and airy. She raised her glass. To success as always. Nathan grabbed a beer from the fridge and joined her, taking a sip before he leaned against the counter. How was your trip with Jared? Claire paused, her fingers tightening slightly on the stem of her glass. It went well. He's learning quickly, though he still has a lot to absorb. Nathan nodded, his expression softening. I'm glad to hear that. Thanks for mentoring him. It means a lot. Claire's smile remained, but Nathan missed the flicker of something in her eyes. An unspoken tension she quickly matched. Later that evening, Nathan and Claire sat in the living room. The television droned on in the background as Nathan flipped through channels. Claire sat beside him, her phone glowing in her lap, her attention elsewhere. Are you free next weekend? Nathan asked, breaking the silence. Claire glanced up. Why? I thought we could get away for a couple of days. Just the two of us. She hesitated, her eyes darting back to her phone. That sounds nice, but I've got another trip next week. Jared's coming along again. It's the same project. Nathan frowned slightly, but forced a smile. He's lucky to have you guiding him. I'm sure he's learning a lot. Claire smiled faintly. He is. As the evening wore on, Nathan noticed Claire's restlessness. She kept glancing at her phone, her fingers tracing absent patterns on her thigh. He dismissed it, attributing it to her usual work stress. The next morning, Nathan left early for work. As he grabbed his keys, he glanced back at Claire, who stood by the doorway in her robe, a coffee mug cradled in her hands. I'll be back by 6, he said. Dinner together? Sounds perfect, she replied with a soft smile. Nathan kissed her cheek and left, but the image of her standing there lingered in his mind. Something about her posture, the way her smile faded as soon as the door closed, unsettled him. Later that day, Nathan received a text from Jared. Hey man, thanks for all the support. Claire's been amazing to work with. Can't wait for the next trip. Nathan smiled at the message, but found himself rereading it. Something about the enthusiasm felt off. Nathan returned home that evening to find Claire preparing dinner. The aroma of roasted vegetables and seared chicken filled the kitchen, and the sight of her humming softly to herself briefly eased his mind. Smells great, Nathan said, setting down his briefcase. Claire turned, her smile bright but brief. Just a little something special for us. They ate together, their conversation light and easy. For a moment, everything felt normal, almost perfect. But as they cleared the table, Claire's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it quickly before flipping it over, her smile tightening. Who's that? Nathan asked casually. Just work, Claire replied, her tone dismissive. Nothing important. Nathan nodded, but a seed of doubt had been planted. The following week, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He replayed small moments in his mind. Claire's sudden trips, her guarded demeanor, the way she seemed glued to her phone at odd hours. One evening, as Claire packed for her next trip, Nathan stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching her fold her clothes with methodical precision. You've been traveling a lot lately, he said. Claire paused, but didn't look up. It's part of the job, Nathan. You know that. I know. I feel like we haven't had much time to get her lately. She glanced at him, her smile apologetic. "I'll make it up to you. I promise." While Claire was away, Nathan decided to investigate. He opened their shared calendar, cross-referencing the dates of her trips with Jared's schedule. His stomach dropped. Every trip Claire had taken over the past few months aligned perfectly with Jared's absences from the office. Determined to find out more, Nathan reached out to Melissa, a mutual friend who had attended one of the trips. "Hey, Melissa," he began cautiously. "How was the last project trip? I heard Claire and Jared did great." Melissa hesitated. "They worked well together," she said carefully. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," Nathan replied. "Did they seem close?" It was a long pause. "I don't want to overstep," Melissa finally said, "but yes, they did." Nathan's heart sank. "Thanks for letting me know." Nathan spent the next few days gathering evidence. He combed through bank statements, finding charges for luxury hotels and dinners he didn't remember discussing with Claire. He scoured their photo albums on the cloud, finding candid pictures of Claire and Jared during trips. Pictures she hadn't shown him. His suspicions were confirmed when he received a message from one of Claire's co-workers. "Hey, Nathan. I don't mean interfere, but I thought you should know. Claire and Jared have been spending a lot of time together outside of work. People are starting to talk." On the night of Claire's return, Nathan prepared dinner, as usual. The table was set, candles flickering softly, creating an atmosphere of intimacy that felt almost cruelly ironic. Claire walked in, her expression wary as she took in the effort Nathan had made. "What's all this?" she asked. Nathan smiled tightly. "I thought we could have a nice dinner. It's been a while." They ate in near silence, the tension thick between them. Finally, Nathan set down his fork and met her gaze. "Claire, I need to ask you something." She froze, her glass halfway to her lips. "What is it? Are you happy with me?" he asked, his voice steady but quiet. Claire blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Of course I am. Why would you ask that?" Nathan leaned forward. "Because I don't think you are. And I think I know why." Claire's hand trembled slightly as she set her wine glass on the table. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her tone carefully measured. Nathan leaned back, his eyes fixed on hers. "I know about you and Jared. The trips, the messages, the pictures. I know everything." For a moment, the only sound was the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Claire's face paled, her practiced composure slipping. "You've been spying on me," she finally said, her voice sharp with indignation. "I didn't need to spy," Nathan countered. The truth was there for anyone paying attention. "I just connected the dots." Claire's lips parted as though she were about to argue, but no words came. Her silence was damning. "So it's true," Nathan said, his voice breaking slightly despite his efforts to stay calm. Claire's expression hardened. "And what if it is? What were you expecting, Nathan? You're always so busy with work, always so wrapped up in your own world." Nathan stared at her, disbelief and anger warring in his chest. "Don't you dare blame this on me. I've worked hard to give us the life we have. And in the process, you forgot about me." Claire snapped. "Jared, he saw me. He made me feel alive again." Nathan's hands clenching of fists under the table. "And destroying everything we built together. Was that worth it?" Claire didn't answer. Instead, she stood abruptly and walked toward the kitchen counter, her back to him. "I didn't plan for this to happen," she said quietly. "It just did." The next day, Nathan couldn't bring himself to go to work. Instead, he sat in the living room, staring blankly at the ceiling as the weight of the previous night's confrontation pressed down on him. Memories of their life together played in his mind like an old movie. Their first date, their wedding day, the trips they'd taken. All of it felt like a cruel joke now. In the late afternoon, his phone buzzed with a call from his mother. "Nathan's sweetheart. How are you?" she asked. Nathan hesitated. "Not great, Mom. Claire and I were having problems." His mother's voice softened. "Oh, Nathan, I'm so sorry to hear that. Do you want to talk about it?" I don't know if talking will help. He said, his throat tightening. It's just complicated. You're stronger than you think. His mother said gently. Whatever happens, you'll get through this. Her words were a small comfort, but they couldn't erase the ache in his chest. That evening, Claire came home late. Nathan was sitting at the kitchen table. Papers spread out in front of him. Bank statements, emails, and screenshots of messages between her and Jared. Claire froze in the doorway. What's all this? She asked, her voice cautious. This, Nathan said, gesturing to the papers, is the full scope of your betrayal. I've been piecing it together for weeks. Claire's face flushed with anger. You had no right to dig into my private life. You made it my business the moment you started using our money to fund your affair. Nathan shot back. Claire's jaw tightened. Fine. You want the truth? Yes. Jared and I are together. And yes, we've been planning to leave. But what do you expect me to do, Nathan? Pretend like everything's fine. Nathan's heart ached, but has resolved in waver. I expect you to take responsibility for what you've done. But clearly, that's too much to ask. The next day, Nathan decided to confront Jared directly. He showed up at his office unannounced, his jaw tight with determination. Jared looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face. Nathan, what are you doing here? Nathan stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. I'm here to tell you that I know everything about you and Claire. Jared leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting to one of smug indifference. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Sorry. Nathan's voice rose. You destroyed my marriage. My life. Jared shrugged. Claire made her choice. Maybe you should take a good look at yourself and figure out why. Nathan's fist clenched at his sides, but he forced himself to stay calm. You think you've won? You have it. Claire will see through you eventually. And when she does, you'll have nothing. Jared smirked. We'll see about that. Nathan wasted no time in contacting his lawyer, Emily, to begin divorce proceedings. I want everything handled swiftly and decisively, he told her, sliding a folder of evidence across the desk. Emily flipped through the papers, her expression grim. This is a lot. With this evidence, you'll have a strong case. Claire won't see a dime. That's the goal. Nathan said coldly. I won't let her walk away from this unscathed. Over the next few weeks, Nathan worked closely with Emily to untangle his finances and protect his assets. Claire, meanwhile, was left reeling as her access to their joint accounts was cut off. Every move she tried to make was met with a roadblock. And it wasn't long before she realized the full extent of Nathan's retaliation. One evening, Claire showed up at Nathan's office unannounced. Her usually impeccable appearance was disheveled. Her eyes filled with desperation. Nathan, we need to talk, she said, stepping into his office. There's nothing to talk about. Nathan replied, barely glancing up from his desk. You're ruining everything. Claire said, her voice trembling. Jared and I, you and Jared made your choices. Nathan interrupted. Now you have to live with them. Claire's expression hardened. You're being cruel. No, Nathan said, standing to face her. I'm being fair. You betrayed me, Claire. You don't get to walk away without consequences. As Nathan methodically dismantled their plans, the cracks in Jared and Claire's relationship began to show. The stress of being cut off financially and socially took its toll, and their once passionate connection started to unravel. Arguments became frequent, and the blame game began. This was supposed to be our fresh start. Claire shouted during one particularly heated argument. I didn't ask for this. Jared snapped. You were the one who wanted to leave him. The tension between Claire and Jared escalated with each passing day. Without Nathan's financial support, Claire was forced to rely on Jared, whose confidence began to crumble under the weight of their collapsing plans. Their shared apartment became a battleground filled with accusations and regrets. I gave up everything for you, Claire hissed during another heated argument. Her face was flushed. Her arms crossed defensively. You think I didn't sacrifice anything? Jared shot back. I've lost my job, my reputation, And now I'm stuck here with you. Trying to clean up the mess you created. The mess I created? Claire's voice rose to a shrill pitch. You were the one who convinced me this would work. Jared laughed bitterly, shaking his head. You were the one unhappy in your marriage, Claire. Don't pin this on me. The argument ended with Jared storming out, slamming the door behind him. Claire was left alone, her chest heaving with frustration and regret. Meanwhile, Nathan focused on rebuilding his life. He sold the house he had once shared with Claire, unable to bear the memories it held. The sale provided him with a fresh start, both financially and emotionally. He moved into a sleek, modern apartment in the city, a stark contrast to the suburban home he had left behind. Nathan also found solace in his work. The Novak deal he had secured just before everything unraveled had brought him recognition within the company, and he was soon promoted to a senior position. His colleagues admired his professionalism, unaware of the personal turmoil he had endured. In his free time, Nathan began to rediscover himself. He took up hobbies he had long neglected, jogging along the river, trying new recipes, and even attending a local book club. Slowly but surely, he began to feel like himself again. Claire and Jared's troubles didn't stay private for long. Nathan's carefully executed plans ensured that their indiscretions became public knowledge. Mutual friends distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with the couple who had betrayed Nathan so publicly. At work, Jared faced increasing scrutiny. Rumors about his affair with Claire spread like wildfire, and his superiors began questioning his professionalism. It wasn't long before he was called into a meeting with HR. Jared, the HR director said, her tone firm, "We've received multiple complaints about your conduct. This company values integrity, and your actions have violated that standard." Jared tried to argue, but the evidence was irrefutable. He was let go the same day, leaving him unemployed and humiliated. Claire, too, faced consequences. Her reputation within her industry was tarnished, and job offers became scarce. She found herself struggling to maintain the lifestyle she had once taken for granted. One evening, as Nathan strolled through the city, he spotted Claire sitting alone at a cafe. She looked different. Her usually polished appearance was replaced with a disheveled, almost defeated demeanor. For a moment, he considered walking past her, but something made him pause. "Claire," he said, his voice calm but distant. She looked up startled. "Nathan." There was an awkward silence before she gestured to the chair across from her. "Would you like to sit?" Nathan hesitated before taking the seat. "How are you?" Claire let out a bitter laugh. "Not great. Jared and we're not together anymore." Nathan raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, letting her continue. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, her voice trembling. "But I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." Nathan studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You're right. I can't forgive you. But I hope you find peace." He stood and left, his heart surprisingly light. The encounter had given him the closure he didn't realize he needed. Jared's life continued to spiral downward. Without a job or a support system, he found himself staying in a run-down apartment on the outskirts of the city. His days were spent searching for work, though most companies turned him away after a quick background check. One night, as he sat in the dim light of his apartment, Jared scrolled through his phone, debating whether to call Nathan. He stared at Nathan's contact for a long moment before shaking his head. He'd never answer. Jared muttered to himself. Instead, he sent a message to Claire. "I made a mistake. I miss you." Claire read the message, but didn't respond. She had moved on, unwilling to revisit the chaos they had created together. Months passed, and Nathan found himself on a steady path of healing. He had reconnected with old friends and even started dating again, though he approached relationships with caution. Trust was not something he gave easily anymore. One evening, his friend Michael invited him to a small gathering. "You need to get out more," Michael said, clapping Nathan on the back. "Meet new people." At the gathering, Nathan struck up a conversation with a woman named Sophie. She was kind, intelligent, and had a warmth that immediately put him at ease. They talked for hours, and by the end of the evening, Nathan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Back in her modest apartment, Claire reflected on the choices that had brought her to this point. She had filed for bankruptcy. Her financial troubles too, overwhelming to manage. Her relationship with Jared was beyond repair, and she found herself completely alone. Nathan, on the other hand, continued to thrive. He had learned to let go of the bitterness that once consumed him, focusing instead on the possibilities that lay ahead. His life was far from perfect, but it was his own, and that was enough. One day, as he stood on the balcony of his apartment, watching the city lights flicker below, Nathan raised a glass to the sky. To new beginnings, he murmured, and for the first time in years, he felt free.